broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of Gun Guy Radio is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to episode 203 of Gun Guy Radio. This is the podcast that shines a positive light on the firearms lifestyle. I'm your host, Jake Challen. This is your weekly dose of positive firearms talk without the politics. We have a great panel this week. We have Josh Cast of Four Guys Guns. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Jake. How's it going?
And we have Nate Murr of the Kinetic Development Group, inventor of Grip Stop, writer for Recoil Magazine, and so on. Hey, Nate.
Hey, Jake. How's it going?
Great. So let's talk a little bit about your week in review. Did you guys do anything in guns? Nate?
I shot some guns. That was pretty cool. I went out last week with Lancer, just a couple days ago. Went with Lancer systems up to his 1,000-yard range and shot a man-sized rock with a 5.56 at 1,000 yards. That was pretty cool. And I have an article in this issue of Recoil Concealment about how to stipple your own Glock. So there's my gun stuff for the week.
Very cool. Whitey?
In the past week, I've helped teach some cops how to shoot. I have helped introduce firearms to two new previously against guns people. I have led the charge on Facebook to do more Facebook-y things, and today I did some shotgunning because I'm trying to get into bird hunting.
Really? Interesting.
I've never hunted a day in my life.
Wow. So you have a bird gun picked out?
That's one of the things that we did on Facebook today because there's a couple that I like just from grabbing them off the shelf, but of course they're up there in price point. So
Charles Daly pump. That is my preferred pump, my hunting shotgun. My dad won a Ducks Unlimited raffle. It's worth $150, and I've never cleaned it, ever.
I like the A5 from Browning.
That's a classic.
What we do today was the Mossberg 935.
Another good choice. So you want a semi is where you're looking.
Actually, did we have? Yeah, we had the 935, and we also had a pump. No, a Benelli pump. Benelli Nova, Supernova.
If you're gonna spend Benelli money, I would rather say just spend it on a Benelli semi. If you're gonna buy Benelli.
Well, the A5, that one felt the best pointing. I didn't get a chance to run any rounds through that, but the pump I was most accurate with. It's I needed some things explained to me because we're so used to, we acquire a target, put the sights on it, and boom, there we go. But it's not the same at all with shotguns.
Did they bring the A5 back? I know Browning stopped making it.
Oh my God, it's gorgeous. Yeah, go over to Browning and look at the A5. I thought it was goofy because that little humpback design they have, but
yeah, well, I mean the gun's over 100 years old. John Moses Browning designed that gun.
Nothing. Everything's fine here.
Yeah, the A5 is one of the oldest. I think it's the oldest successful semi-automatic shotgun in the world.
Yeah, there's some nice ones because I'm a big fan of like the walnut in the metal, whether it's blued or shiny. I don't care. Like I'm a fan. If I'm going to go hunting, I want a proper hunting gun. And I think a lot of the polymer and composite stuff with Realtree or Mossy Oak or yada yada. I don't know if I'm ready to jump into that just yet, but.
Yeah, modern technology sucks. I agree with you.
No, what's the A400?
It's a nice high gloss blue and a nice curly maple stock. So it rusts and gets dinged.
Carved into it, and like I should wear like a cowboy hat. I don't know. I do have a cowboy hat.
Like a wool vest and a felt hat.
We're getting off topic. So if you want to look for that wool vest and felt hat, you can check out Amazon, and you can shop with our affiliate link. Get all outfitted with your bird hunting gear there, Whitey. You can bookmark firearmsradio.tv/Amazon to support the show. And also, Patriot Patch Company helps make this episode possible. I guess my week in review, that's been a lot of what I've been up to, is getting Patriot Patch ready to go out to the machine gun shoot here in Pennsylvania this next weekend. And we're going to have a Patriot Patch and a Firearms Radio Network booth there. So that's another plug here, Stone Mountain Machine Gun Shoot, April 30th through May 1st out in Monroeton, PA. Hope to see you out there. I think both of you guys are going to be there, correct?
Yeah, Connect Development Group will have a booth. Whitey will be hanging out at it all day.
All day. I don't get to shoot or
Like,
anything. I'm just
you're
gonna sign
signing
autographs.
autographs, right? $20
Yes.
an autograph.
$20 an autograph. There you go. Someone will buy me a beer, I guess.
Very cool. And if you guys pre-ordered the Gun Collective pre-orders, those are shipping tomorrow, and will also those shirts and maybe patches, if they're left, will be available at the Machine Gun Shoot as well.
Is that the Guntrepreneur?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Right here.
Oh, you have one in hand. Look at that sexy thing.
Yeah. So, and the shirts are in hand as well. So yeah, I'll be shipping all day tomorrow. So, patriotpatch.co for more info there. So, let's get into the main topic this week. This is I need to clean my first gun. We've bought, we've shot, and now we need to clean. So let's start with proper field stripping.
Well, the funny thing is, before we get into proper field stripping, I feel like we should have added this. Knowing your gun will never be as clean as the day you bought it is step one, without going into a full detail strip. But we're not here for that, right? We're here to talk about, like you said, field strip, right?
Right.
Nate, would you agree that without going into a full detail strip, your gun will never be as clean as the day you bought it?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be. Just like the day you drive your brand new car off the lot, it's never going to be a brand new car ever again.
Right.
And like when people say, like, you see people like, oh, I have this new rifle, it's never been shot, and they're trying to sell it to you. I'm like, I personally don't want to buy a firearm that hasn't been fired. Like, I want a gun that's been at the very least test fired, preferably by the factory. That's the other thing is, like, you might buy your new pistol or rifle or shotgun or whatever, and even out of the box, it's dirty. And I see people complain about that too. I'm like, I like to see carbon in my brand new gun because it means the factory function checked the weapon for both safety and function before they put it in the box and mail it to me. And I can't really honestly expect them to clean a gun that they test fired 5 rounds through. It's just time consuming as you're about to learn.
I also like that buying a used gun. I used to love doing that all the time. I'd prefer buying it used as opposed to new, simply because it's like that. Like, here, take this receiver, for instance. This is brand spanking new. I'm not afraid of it because I'm experienced enough to, okay, I'm going to bang this thing up, I'm going to trash it up, and I'm going to put something on it. But when it's your first gun, like the previous episodes went over, and you just shot it and you're happy about it, if it was a used gun that you bought, it already has a lot of that character, that wear, even if it's only minor, and you don't have those same fears as, like, how gently do I click this, how much do I wipe that, I'm afraid of changing the finish or adjusting things at all. So I think a used gun is actually going to be a lot easier for a first gun to get right into the nitty-gritty of cleaning than anything else. It'll probably come apart a little bit easier, too.
Yeah, really great points. So, Nate, what comes to mind when, someone asks you, hey, I got my first handgun, first AR, how do I do a proper field strip on this?
So, assuming that you bought a modern firearm, right? Like, so a gun made in the last 30 years. Firearms are simple machines. Like, your lawnmower has more parts in it than your AR-15 does, right? There's more parts that go into making a Zippo lighter than go into making a Glock. And that's like an actual fact, right? So because they're simple machines, there's only so many assemblies and sub-assemblies in any firearm. Even a firearm that has a motor, like a General Electric minigun, is still relatively simple to take apart in comparison to a more complex machine like an automobile engine, right? So, like Whitey said, number one thing you got to do is read the manual. And if the gun didn't come with a manual, you can contact the manufacturer. They'll be glad to send it to you. Most manufacturers, you can get the manual, you can download it online. Read the manual. Sometimes firearms have parts that aren't quite as intuitive as you would expect them to be for disassembly. So if you try to force something, odds are you're in the wrong. If you're forcing a part or getting out, complex hand tools to try to take your brand new firearm apart, you're probably doing it wrong. So read the manual, cover to cover, and you're going to save yourself a lot of heartache and potential damage to your weapon.
It'll also keep you from taking things apart that were never meant to come apart. Like sometimes, what is it, like a Glock? Just take a normal Glock, for instance. Even all they ever recommend is take the spring out, take the barrel out, scrub it all down if you have to, and then lube it and put it back together. So some weapons are meant to run with carbon buildup in certain areas. It's how they were engineered.
And also, if you take it apart beyond the point that you're comfortable with, it might be very hard for you to get it back together, so now you got to go pay a gunsmith. You got to walk into the shop with the box of shame, i.e. your disassembled weapon in a box or a Ziploc bag, and pay somebody to put it back together because you couldn't figure out how to do it. All right?
Ruger Mark III.
Or you might damage it trying to get it back together because it was out of your skill level, right? And like anything else, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the easier it is to do over time. But I would, and you don't want to void the firearms warranty either. Sometimes if you disassemble a sub-assembly, the manufacturer does not want you to take apart, but you read the manual, it doesn't say anything about this other sub-assembly, and you take it upon yourself. Now you're potentially voiding the firearms warranty, and that's no good, especially if you damage it or can't get it back together. So that's all stuff to keep in mind.
Well, or if you're a guy like me and you're like, read the manual, yeah, that's not for me, and you just start taking things apart, and then you're like, oh crap.
I'm
like the only guy in the world that reads the manual and asks for directions.
So really fast here, we should have said this first, but before you do anything like this, be sure to unload it, take the magazine out of it if it has a magazine, and remove all ammunition from the area. You don't even want ammo in your workspace. So some people even say not even in their room. So clear the weapon. Well,
it's more than a safety thing too. I mean, so a lot of the stuff that you use to clean a gun sometimes is really bad for ammunition altogether, and especially if that's your EDC or your everyday carry or anything that you're counting your life on. You don't want to run any kind of risk of screwing with primers or powder just because you dumped a whole bunch of hops somewhere.
Yeah, not all primers are sealed.
Right.
Like, it's not just moisture, but solvents can break down. If it does have a sealant on the primer, you can eat through. And like the primer is the match that sets off the fire. It catches the fire. So if your primer gets penetrated with solvent or lube or whatever, now it's no longer functional. So that could be the first round in your carry gun, and you get a click instead of a boom, which is no good. So
the other thing is magazines. So when you clean a firearm, which we're going to get to, when you go and do a function check, which we're going to get to, after you sat there and picked apart and been zoned into scraping every little piece of carbon and wiping away every fingerprint, your first instinct to function check that is to grab the available magazine that is nearest to you, insert it, and go ahead and rack and do a function check. Well, if you never removed any ammunition, you run a very high risk simply because you were focused on something completely different intently for a long period of time, and you're going to put a round somewhere, and you're going to be one of those stories where he was cleaning his gun and he had a negligent discharge. So just a little word to the wise from almost bad experiences.
Yeah, like safe firearms handling practices, like the safety rules apply throughout this entire endeavor. I mean, it's not just like I'm handling my firearm or I'm on the range handling my firearm. There's that whole it wasn't loaded. People had negligent discharges for whatever reason, particularly while cleaning their firearm. And it's easily avoidable by confirming that your weapon is unloaded, voiding the weapon of ammunition, putting the ammunition far away from you as you start to do this, administrative task of breaking down your firearm and cleaning it. So, safety is paramount.
It says all this in the manual. So step one was actually spot on, Jake. Read the manual.
Absolutely. And we mentioned this the last couple episodes. Another thing you could bring into play here is a shooting mentor. Someone that's experienced that you could sit down with you and, after you read the manual, walk you through some of this from experience.
What you want to do is find yourself a nice 65-year-old man who's been shooting revolvers and single-shot shotguns his entire life, and believes that a real gun has to have a curly maple stock and a high-gloss blue. He will guide you through every step of the way, unless you got one of them Tupperware pistols. Don't know nothing about them.
So let's get into cleaning gear. Some of the things that I'm going to run through this list and then we can comment on it. So some of the things you may need: solvent, lubricant, painter's tray, cleaning rod, small cups, cleaning patches, rags, brushes, dental picks, bore snake, specialty tools, disassembly tools.
So let's talk about, solvents first on the list. Let's talk about that. Look, a lot of listeners have heard us talk about like the lube wars that are currently raging and all these different opinions that people have about what's the best lubricant, what's the best solvent, all this other stuff, right? At the end of the day, it comes down to this. You have petroleum-based lubricants and solvents, and you have organic based, right? To me, I really don't care. It doesn't make a difference to me either way if it's organic or if it's petroleum. What matters to me is whether or not it works for the task that I'm trying to use it for, right? So you look at solvent, there's plenty of different solvents out there. There's old military solvent you can find at gun shows, which is highly toxic if you ingest it, but it's actually really good at cleaning your bore, right? It's really good at breaking down carbon. You can use classic hops number 9 made here in Pennsylvania where I'm from, which, I'm a good Pennsylvania boy, so to be honest with you, I still use hops number 9 sometimes. But think about what you're doing. Solvent is there to break down carbon and debris buildup, right? So what I use the most to clean my firearms is carburetor cleaner. There's plenty of people who use carburetor cleaner and brake cleaner, that kind of stuff, to clean their weapon. Just because of what it's designed to do, which is break down carbon. There's not much difference between the carbon in a firearm and the carbon in a car. The only thing you got to be careful, especially with solvents, because most solvents are very aggressive, is that if you have any polymer or plastic parts in your gun, that it doesn't eat those parts. It doesn't melt the plastic or weaken the plastic or polymer. So you want to make sure that if you use carburetor cleaner, like I do, make sure it's non-chloritic. It's not chlorinated.
And that's one of those horrible, horrible things that, you never want to teach somebody who's first cleaning their gun. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to learn how to clean your gun, you learn how to clean it the good old-fashioned way, because it familiarizes you more with the internals and the inner workings and how things are supposed to function. Once you get past how everything does, and you can do it, upside down in the dark, blindfolded, and you can completely field strip, disassemble, reassemble, and you're good to go, then I say do like what everyone else does, which is take your dechlorinated brake cleaner or your gun scrubber, your M Pro 7, you just blast that thing out until it's good and clean, and then start your wiping and lube process. But I prefer teaching people the part-by-part way, because they should know. Like everyone should learn how to drive a standard car before they get into an automatic.
So, I mean, like, in all fairness, like, I agree with Whitey, too, like, going slow. Like, if you want to buy a pre-made kit that basically comes with everything you need, you can get one for $20 at Walmart. You can buy a nicer kit, like a MS Clean clean kit or a Dewey cleaning kit. There's plenty of kits out there you can buy, and you use the solvent that they give you. You use the lube that they originally give you. You can start out that way and start slow. And I mean, that's how most shooters begin anyway. Like when I was a kid, my dad had this old 30 cal ammo can with all the gun cleaning stuff in it, and in that kit was the same hops kit, hops number 9 cleaning kit that he had since he was a little boy. So, like there's plenty of kits out there, and those kits usually do come with a solvent and a lubricant, but most of the stuff you can find at your local big box store like Walmart or sometimes Kmart. If you really don't know what to get after the show, then you can just buy a basic kit. We'll learn on your own as you go what works and what doesn't for you and in your particular cleaning.
Very good point. What works for you, because everyone's going to have a different weapon, everyone's going to have a different style, and a different. We talked about previously to the show starting. Everyone's going to have a different area. Hence, some of the things on this list, like a painter's tray or small cups and spray tops. You don't really need small cups and tops for full-size pistol recoil spring and rod. But if you're doing like the bolt carrier group of an AR-15, some of those parts can very easily go in that little cup and soak a little bit longer while you're working on bigger pieces. So keep that in mind when we go through this list.
Well, and I guess we should have mentioned, kind of think ahead to your work area. Are you going to clean, right on your kitchen table? I mean, maybe some people are. Maybe your wife isn't going to like that, or your husband, whichever way.
Yeah, if you have a garage or an outdoor area to clean your weapon, like you're still spraying aerosol, petroleum products. It's probably not the best to breathe in. If you want to set up a little fan. Do it in a well-vented area so you don't start tripping off the hops number 9 or carb cleaner or whatever, right? I mean, like for those of you that live in smaller apartments where you don't really have that outdoor area or that garage or whatever, you can get like an old military wool blanket and lay that down over your coffee table, and the wool will soak up the petroleum, and that's like your gun cleaning, cloth. You can do the same thing with an old towel. You want to basically like set up your little workstation, make sure that there's no food or drink around that you can get chemicals into, and that's where things like the painter's tray comes in handy, because you can get a painter's tray for like $3 or $4 at Home Depot, big box store, and that's like your little workstation, right? So it'll help capture overspray and stuff like that as you're going. You can use it as a soak tank to soak your bolt carrier group or your barrel and slide of your pistol in solvent as you're cleaning other parts of the gun. That's just a handy little thing to have. I mean, I keep mine under my sofa. It's under there right now, under my seat. So, It stores easy, and if you really want to, they're cheap enough you can throw them away. You can use them one use. So
I have a cat that will never be the same because of Hops number 9. So
how's that?
she used to sneak down while I was cleaning my pistols and stuff, and she would take the used patches and just chew on them like bubble gum, and then next thing you know, she's doing that whole, what was this? What was that? And then bouncing off the walls and doing like Matrix runs up and down. So she would literally be horizontal, like gleaming the cube, but like cat style for all you old timers. I think it's an old Tony Hawk movie, but anywho. Cleaning rod, I think, is the next one, and that's important. Not just for cleaning, but also a good one to have, whether it's a threaded model or something like on the high end, like a Dewey rod. It can save your butt, not just with anything stuck, especially when you put too many patches into the bore and things like that, or if you actually have a stuck casing and things like that. A good high-quality rod is going to last you a lot longer, and you're going to be thankful when you need it, as opposed to the one.
And that's probably something you should think about when you're making your purchases. Like, I have a one-piece Dewey rod that I've had for like 15 years. Like, every single sniper rifle in the military is issued with a Dewey rod. Okay, it's a one-piece rod. It's nearly indestructible. It's very tough. It's got a swivel head, so the rod can spin as it goes down the bore. I think they're like probably the best cleaning rod on the market, right?
Yeah.
But a 3 foot or 4 foot long straight piece of metal cleaning rod isn't really field portable. So you're probably going to end up owning both at some point. Sectioned, screw together rods, and then probably a one-piece rod like a Dewey rod. I highly recommend the Dewey rods for one-piece rod just because they're indestructible and they make cleaning a lot easier. You don't have to sit there and screw all your attachments together. But particularly for people that are going to purchase an AR-15, I highly, highly recommend buying an actual military-style steel cleaning rod with a T-handle. And like what you just said, if you get a stuck casing, trying to get that stuck casing out with anything other than a metal steel rod, it's not going to happen. Like, if you have that in your range kit,
even a brass one is going to.
A brass one will buckle and get gnarled up. And people are like, well, I don't want to put steel on steel. Well, if you have, you're putting force on the casing, not so much on the sidewalls of your barrel. And if your barrel's chrome lined, chrome's harder than steel, so it doesn't really matter, right? The military's been using steel rods literally forever. Like, World War II steel cleaning rods, World War I steel cleaning rods, and if there's actually that much of an issue with it hurting your rifling, then they want to still to this very day issue it. That being said, if you have like a high-end precision rifle, I'm probably going to be a little bit more cautious with steel rods just because of that match grade $500 barrel I got. In that case, I would definitely use a brass rod or a polymer coated Dewey rod just to protect the rifling, the lands and grooves of your rifle.
And more to the point of buy once, cry once. I'll guarantee if you buy one of those cheap rods that has multiple screw-in points and things like that, do yourself a favor out of the gates and spend the $3 3 times. Get yourself $9 worth of rods because you're either going to bend one, lose screws, lose threads, lose a handle until eventually, maybe 6 months to a year later, you'll have one complete rod after going through all 3 sets and mixing and matching.
Yeah, like the aluminum rods are the worst. Like, especially you have aluminum threading into aluminum, and that is, aluminum's a soft metal, so you can get a patch stuck as you pull it through your bore, and then have your eyelet holding the patch tear off, the threads tear out. Now you got to beat it back.
Rupture the sidewall, like all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
It's terrible. So
well, I've ran into that because we mentioned Walmart. You pick up cheap cleaning kits and stuff, and pretty much any big box store you can pick up a cleaning kit of some kind with those screw together rods, but almost universally all of those just suck. I mean, they're the aluminum or brass rods are in those, and they're just no good, and they're they'll work for your first time or two, but for long term it's really worth investing in quality rods for sure.
Look, as a kid, I grew up pretty poor, but when I was a little boy I used to take a wire coat hanger that I straightened out, and I used to push my patches down my 22 bolt action with that coat hanger, right? So the thing is, it's like you can make do, and you're going to hear this is going to be a common theme throughout this whole conversation. There's plenty of small, common, everyday items that you can use to help facilitate cleaning your firearm. I would say, if you're going to buy one kit, I would buy an MS Clean or a Dewey kit, because I think those two companies make the best kits, particularly for a wide range of firearms. You can use it for a lot of different things. I would probably go for a high-end kit like one of those two companies over that $20 Walmart kit for that reason, just because it's going to last longer and it's more value. But
so let's talk about patches. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you say patches?
Buy all of them.
Use old T-shirts and a pair of scissors. So, like, there's no one patch fits all, right? Like, if you have a 12-gauge shotgun, the patch that you need for that is going to be a lot bigger than the patch that you want to try to shove down the bore of your .22 long rifle. So you can buy, like, when I buy patches, I like to buy all cotton patches. And what I do is I buy larger ones so that I can cut them down to fit smaller calibers, right? Alternatively, you can take all your old T-shirts and cut them into the size patches that you want. Or if you really want to, you can go to like Joann Fabrics and buy a yard of white cotton fabric and, you know, trick one of your loved ones into sitting there and making patches for you one evening as you sit there watching TV, right? So, like, there's some pretty crazy patches that, like, fold up like a little flower, and there's all kinds of there's so much gimmicky stuff in the gun cleaning world, right? But to me, it's like whatever works, you know. Use a patch. If you take a patch and you try to put it down your bore, you try to clean your barrel with it, and if it's way too tight where you have to really put some effort into it, that's a clear indicator that you have a patch that's too big. So you need to cut it down or, you know, get smaller patches. But don't keep trying to do that, because that's a recipe for disaster. That's how you get a patch stuck in your barrel.
And you're going to use a lot of them. Period. End of sentence. There's no like, oh, I only used 5 patches. That's going to boil down to lubrication, CLPs, and preparation later on. When you go to clean something filthy, you're going to use a lot of patches or a lot of T-shirts or a lot of rags, because there's way more buildup and carbon and funk in there than you ever thought was possible.
And that's, like, you can do the same thing. Like, I use Q-tips a lot. I'll use Q-tips in small areas, so I burn through a bunch of Q-tips. And the same thing, like, you can use cotton balls. So you can take a cotton ball and soak it in solvent or carb cleaner and use that to swab large areas like the inside of your AR-15 receiver or you know, the underside of your slide, and you can use that to put more solvent and kind of control where you want to put it. But Whitey's 100% spot on. You're going to burn through patches like it's crazy. It's a consumable item just like your lubricant, so, you know,
Don't be stingy.
Don't be stingy with it, right? If you're going to do it, if you're going to sit there and spend the time and get your hands covered in solvent lube, you might as well do it right, and don't be scared to use all the patches.
Brushes.
So, yeah, brushes. I almost go through brushes as fast as some of these other items. You know, there's steel tip brushes, brass tipped, and like nylon plastic tip brushes. And there's, you know, ones with different head sizes. Some people use toothbrushes.
Yeah. Well, like like, there's basically like 3 different types of brush, right? You have a bore brush, a chamber brush, and then a general purpose brush, right? So, like, you can get a military general purpose brush. Looks like a green toothbrush with big bristles on one side and smaller bristles on the other, right? And those bristles are harder. It's a stiffer plastic than a standard toothbrush. You can use standard toothbrush. Like, all the old ladies that would send us toothbrushes when we were deployed overseas, I'm going to tell you right now, like, I use a lot of Oral-B $5 toothbrushes to clean my 249 Sol and my M4 carbine, right? So I wouldn't recommend going and buying an expensive actual hygiene toothbrush to use, but you can totally recycle your old toothbrushes from, you know, when you're done with them, just wash them out and you can use them to clean your guns, or get military ones. For bore brushes, I prefer brass bristle brushes, right? For the chamber and for the bore, right? And you want to get the appropriate size brush for the appropriate size caliber you're shooting. Don't try to use an oversized brush or undersized brush, because it's not going to work out. You need to get caliber specific brushes. But we kind of like glossed over, I wanted to say real quick, with the rags, one of my favorite things to use for rags, aside from old T-shirts, is if you go and get cloth diapers. So it's kind of like a little story. Like, my first day at boot camp, and we go to commissary, and they have this gear list of all the stuff we have to buy, and on that list is diapers. I'm like, why am I buying diapers? Like, what kind of horrors are in store for me here at Marine Corps Basic Training, right? And the reason why the Marine Corps makes us buy cloth diapers is because it turns out they're like the most awesome gun cleaning rag in the world, because they're double ply thick in the center, right, to catch dirtiness. So it works out really great as a gun cleaner rag because it holds that solvent, and it you know, it's all cotton, it's organic, all that nonsense. But cloth diapers are my absolute favorite cleaning rag. And when they get really dirty, what you can do is you can put them in a 5-gallon bucket with dish soap and hand wash them and just hang them to dry, so you can reuse them over and over and over. Or you can throw them away, because a pack of like 10 of them is like $15, so it's not the end of the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is 7 inning stretch time. We invite you to join in singing take me out to the ball game.
Patches, get your patches here. Patriot Patch Company has all your favorite flavors. Tactical, Western, sci-fi, pop culture, hot and ready. Don't forget to wash it down with a Pro Gun Custom Screen Printed t-shirt. Available in sizes medium to 5XL. They're great for any occasion. Patches, get your patches at patriotpatch.co.
Real quick on brushes, I think we kind of, again, glossed over a spot. So there's two kinds of brushes that most people, one may be very familiar, one may not be. So there's brushes like Nate was talking about, like a toothbrush. For instance, I don't know where I found them. I was just scouring Amazon. I have a two-sided brush that most times with guns you'll find a big fat side and then like a fine side. The ones I have, I just disregard the fine side altogether. The ones I have like a 45-degree lip off the front and it has a small fat square and then the big rectangle underneath it, so I can actually just flip it around to get a different angle. You have steel, you have brass, you have nylon. Sometimes you'll have nylon of different densities. It's important to know what each brush is capable of, because if you take a nice black anodized receiver and you hit it with a steel brush, it's going to have a completely different effect than if you do that to, say, a nickel boron bolt carrier group. That's going to be totally fine with it. The abrasions and how it works, make sure you do like the old car test, kind of test on a small and conspicuous area first if you're unsure. But always start down and work your way up, like from nylon up to brass. And if you're going past brass, make sure it's nothing that's going to scrape off more than just what you're trying to get off when it comes to those.
Yeah, steel brushes are the worst. I agree with you 100%, Whitey.
Yeah.
If you take a steel brush to aluminum, you're going to have a bad time.
You have a shiny spot.
You're going to have a shiny spot. You're definitely going to see the bristles scratch. I don't own any steel cleaning brushes. I don't have them because I don't need them. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the dirt and grime off our firearms, and usually a nylon bristle brush is enough to do that if you're using a good solvent.
Yeah.
And as far as, like, say for the AR-15, like the tail of the bolt where it mates inside the carrier, that gets completely covered in carbon, right? So instead of me trying to take a steel brush to that, I might scuzz it by holding a bore brush between my thumb and my forefinger and just going back and forth and scuzzing it off that way. But what I find, I use a green Scotch-Brite pad soaked in solvent to clean that area, right? So it's like, yeah, green Scotch-Brite works out really well. And actually another trick that I learned, I've seen Iraqis do it with their AK-47s, and I've seen Marines do it with the pistons on their 240s and 249s, is to pick up a handful of like fine sand, like talcum powder sand, or even just dry dirt, and lay the piston in that handful of dirt and then spin it, and the slightly abrasiveness of the dirt or the sand will take the carbon off. But obviously the more you do that, the more it's going to wear the part. So it's not a preferred way of cleaning your weapon, but it's a field expedient way if you don't have the proper cleaning gear.
The other type of brush that works really well is one that goes, again, with the rods we had mentioned before. Those are meant specifically to go into cylindrical areas like your bore, like your barrel, like any spot that you can't get in there, period, and you can go, in and out that way. So you're going to have, again, nylon and brass, usually the only two available, and you're going to have different caliber-specific models. So brushes could be brush like you're used to, or a brush that goes on a shaft.
So let's keep moving along here. Dental picks.
So, yeah, like they come in handy. They get all those little nooks and crannies that are hard to get, especially like the rails of your pistol slide. You can use them to push a patch down those raceways, down that dovetail. They're really good for picking out carbon off your bolt carrier, or just hard to reach areas. And
90-degree mate area.
Yep. So you can use other things for that too. Like basically, you're using it as a scraper tool. There's plenty of scraper tools on the market. Like I designed one that's manufactured. Dental picks, scraping tools. You can even use a pocket knife. If you have you can go buy a $1 pocket knife in the camping section of Walmart and put that in your gun cleaning kit and just use it as your carbon scraper, because the thing is already halfway dull like a butter knife. So you're only going to use it to scrape large chunks of carbon off like the bolt tail of an AR-15. Right now, I don't ever use that knife for a scraping tool on my hunting shotgun because it just doesn't get that much carbon. So it's kind of like what Whitey was saying with the brushes, like knowing the right place and the right time. Just think about what you're doing. If you're worried about testing it on an inconspicuous area first. But dental picks are handy to have. I recommend picking a couple up. You can check out the different scraper tools that are on the market that help serve as a mechanical aid of busting off carbon.
All right, bore snake, Whitey.
I like the bore snakes as like a final touch. I don't usually like using a bore snake to thoroughly clean out anything out, like from just nothing to polished. It doesn't work that way for me. I prefer to get everything in and out of there, and I use the bore snake. What did I call it? A squeegee.
The squeegee,
I call it
yeah.
a squeegee because when I'm all said and done and I'm convinced that we're good to go with the barrel, that's when I'll probably put a little bit of lubricant on an actual bore snake, if anything at all, and I'll run it through. Now, bore snakes are going to be caliber specific as well as come in a long length, so there's certain things to avoid, and that is, one, make sure there's nothing on the damn thing, because if you do, you might have, again, a bad time. If you have some sort of metal or really abrasive material, you're now going to just run this right down your bore, and it's going to leave a nice gouge or scrape, and I'm sure Nate's got a fun story to go along with that. And it's just really good because it starts thin, has some bristles dug into it, has a loop on the bottom to make it bigger and fatter, and you just start at the breech and run it all the way through to the end of the muzzle. One fell swoop, leaves it nice and polished. I'm a big fan of it. But
Yeah,
Nate has some more.
I like bore snakes too because they're quick and easy to use. Back in the old days, I used to be just completely insane about keeping my bore clean, and now I very rarely clean my bore, right? Once in a while, I'll run a bore snake through my rifle bore like 3 times, and that's all the attention my bore actually gets, right? Because the second you fire your weapon again, it's going to become fouled, right? So consistency equals accuracy. If I'm trying to make a cold bore shot as accurate as I possibly can, the data that I have on my gun is from the last time I shot my gun, which means it was dirty when I shot it, right? So I'm not crazy about cleaning my barrel. I am crazy about cleaning my chamber, particularly on AR-15s, right? Now, for pistol barrels and stuff like that, it doesn't matter. They're very easy to clean, so it takes you 30 seconds to scrub out a Glock barrel. Like, usually, you have a Glock barrel or, a Springfield Armory XD or Smith & Wesson M&P. You can clean a barrel in, like, all of 3 seconds. I mean, you just run a couple patches or a bore snake through it 3 times, and there's no carbon in there. Rifles are a little bit different. I would say this, particularly for rifles, if you use a bore snake, make sure that it's in good... it's good serviceable condition before you use it. I've broken bore snakes off halfway down the barrel. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is, like, you have a couple choices. Either you buy a new barrel, or you sit there and you just literally torch your barrel with a torch and melt the plastic that the bore snake's made out of, so it shrinks down. You're going to be there for the next 4 hours with a cleaning rod and a propane torch, and you do not want that to happen to you like it happened to me when I was deployed, okay? It just, your gun's done until you get that obstruction out of the bore. So
if you use a Dewey rod, you can hammer that thing.
Yeah, and that's what I had to do that one time. So I've seen bore snakes fail, and it's from not being, like, they're like $20. So if you use it for a couple of years, throw it away and get a new one, especially if it starts to abrade and show wears of signs of wear. So, I mean, like, they're a really handy tool. I don't think they replace the cleaning rod by any stretch of the means, but they're nice to have. It does make cleaning really fast, but it's a supplemental cleaning product. It's not the end-all, be-all thing.
And I guess to wrap up the gear section, there's lots of specialty tools, disassembly tools out there. Not always necessary, but there's a lot of options that can make field stripping or doing a full takedown a lot easier.
Yeah, a lot of them are gimmicks, but if you, especially with hunting style firearms, like if I want to take my Ruger 1022 apart, I have to take a flat tip screwdriver. So depending on what firearm you're trying to clean, you may or may not need some basic tools like a punch or a screwdriver or an Allen. Just be aware of that, and you're going to learn that by reading your manual.
Mm-hmm. So how to clean? Again, first make sure your firearm is empty. Clean the ammo out of your workspace. Empty the magazines, et cetera, et cetera. So what are we cleaning here? We're cleaning carbon, fouling, possibly pocket lint, grime, dirt,
Like
maybe a bore obstruction, maybe a squib load even.
Well, carbon's definitely your number one enemy, right? So carbon doesn't hurt your firearm, right? Carbon doesn't cause rust. Like, carbon is like the most natural thing in the universe, right? But what carbon is it's a foreign substance that's created by firing your weapon, and left unattended, it builds up. And because of the tight tolerances that most firearms have, once you have too much carbon, those mechanical parts create more friction. they start seizing up, they don't like the work, right? So carbon's like the number one thing that you want to attack. If it's black and chalky, then that's what you want to focus your efforts on. Like for me, when I clean an AR-15, I literally spend 10 minutes cleaning an AR-15. I focus on the carrier of the bolt and the bolt itself, because that's the two places on the gun that you find the most carbon. And then the last place is the the chamber area of your AR-15. I don't spend much time on the barrel. I don't spend much time on the trigger group. Everything is with where the carbon is, because the carbon is what's going to seize my gun up. So that's the main point of effort or focus point for me on any firearm, is wherever the carbon is building. Whitey?
I agree 100%. And it's funny how much time you spend on an upper receiver and just that meat of it, not the barrel, not all the other fun stuff, especially on an AR-15. The trigger group can almost never need any service aside from checking to make sure springs are fine, no rust, nothing's loose. Almost nothing except for excess lube and stuff attached to it falls into that area. Everywhere it's thick and chalky. That scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where he crams that big pole right into the front of that German's motorcycle tire and the guy literally flips a million times, that's what happens if you don't pay attention to your carbon, because it's literally impeding the motion like Nate had already eloquently described, and you don't have much room there. So carbon is number one. It's also going to probably be your toughest combatant, and that's why we have things like solvents and those dental picks and stuff that's going to give you a little bit more leverage in the tighter areas.
Now, if you're out in the field, like you're hunting with your gun, or it's a muddy range, your hands are dirty, whatever it might be, you can have other types of fouling, right? So that's like next on the list, and that could be like sand, like over in Iraq and Afghanistan, guys clean their rifles every single day, despite the fact that they might not shoot their weapons every day, because of that talcum powder sand, that dirt, that grime is constantly in the wind and blowing. Or if you fall and you drop your rifle in the mud, well, don't shoot your weapon until you clean your barrel at the very least. Like, you want to make sure that you don't have any bore obstructions. And those bore obstructions can come in a lot of different ways. It could be a small rock, it could be mud, it could be sand, it could be pocket lint in your handgun. There's all different types of grime and dirt.
It could be old lube.
Yeah, it could be old gummed up lube. So those are all things that you're looking for and you're removing as you clean your firearm. The biggest thing is never forget that when you pull the trigger on a gun, it's a controlled explosion. You're the one actuating that explosion. And if you have a bore obstruction, that's how you blow your gun up. That's how you destroy your gun, and that's how you hurt yourself and people around you. So the bore obstruction is definitely the most important thing to check for, even more so than the actual operation of the gun. Obviously we want our guns clean, that's why we're cleaning it, but that's one thing I always 100% check for when I'm cleaning a firearm, regardless if it's a 22 bolt action or a 12 gauge shotgun or my carry gun.
All right, I think we already kind of covered breaking it down, cleaning fluids, different materials, scraping. I think we kind of covered that. What about stuff that isn't gonna ever go away?
Before we get into that, I think pocket lint, grime, and dirt is something that people should be prepared for if it's their first time.
Okay.
So that caught me completely off guard the first time I took my shield apart. So I've been shooting guns for a while, I've been cleaning guns for a while, and you have your EDC gun. Well, if you put a gun in a holster, or you put a gun in your safe, things like that, but specifically pocket lint, you put a gun in a holster, your brain kind of tells you the same thing, just like you put it in your safe. If it didn't come out, if it didn't get fired, anything like that at all, you have no worries at all, and the gun is going to be in the same condition it was the last time you put it in that holster when you take it out. The reality of when you carry a gun is really, really kind of creepy when you take that gun apart. Never pulled it out, never shot it. It was your EDC for, say, 2 months. 2 months you pulled it out and said, oh, let me just check. You're going to find so much lint, hair, dust, things that you never even knew were in there that can very quickly lead up to becoming a problem with the gun not firing, not striking, not ejecting magazines, and that goes all the way down into the magazine. You'd be surprised, especially inside the waistband, how much stuff gets in there. So if you're going to carry a gun, make sure that you're at least spot checking it. Like every few weeks, I think, is a safe assessment. Nothing's really happening. In those times, you're just carrying a gun, unless you went and did a Tough Mudder with a full EDC on. But
my thing is that I'm an idiot, so I forget things, right? Like, when I change the batteries on an optic, I take a Sharpie and I write the month and year on the battery that I changed it, right? And if I can't remember the last time I changed a battery on an optic, then that means it's probably time that I check and just go ahead and change out those batteries. Like, for everyday carry guns, I noticed the exact same thing when, I was a young buck and I started carrying as soon as I got my, turned 21 and could get my permit. that lint builds up really fast. So for me, like if you're carrying a modern firearm like a Glock or a Smith & Wesson, it doesn't really matter as much. A little lint's not going to seize your gun up. But left unattended, if you're going to carry the gun for months on end without firing it or cleaning it, which right there is wrong. You shouldn't be. You should be shooting it and cleaning it on a regular basis. You have that moral responsibility. People have heard me say that before. But what I do is every single day before I leave the house, when I pick up the gun and I put the gun on, I clear my weapon out, I check my weapon, make sure it's operable, and then I load and chamber around and put it in my holster, and that's my routine. And if you don't get in that routine, if you handle your firearm in between and you unload it, it's really, really, really easy to forget the chamber around, or for you not to notice the lint that's slowly accumulating on your rear sight, and God forbid you actually need to use your firearm one day, well now there's a big ball of lint blocking your sight picture, or the trigger doesn't want to move because it's seized up from lube that's really old. I'm a big advocate of op-checking your equipment every time you're going to potentially need to use it. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Stuff that isn't going away.
See, I've just added this to my everyday carry, so if I have to pull my gun out, pull the can of air out, blow your gun off, and then engage.
Somebody's going to make a Kydex holster for that, just because you said it.
Boom.
Absolutely.
Stuff that isn't going away. I personally added this one because, sometimes we're not the smartest, and the reality is that every gun, for the most part, is made of either similar materials, similar coatings. There are no identicals because everyone likes to patent the world. So stuff that isn't going away kind of pertains to discoloration, carbon buildup and cleaning over time, wear and tear, scuffs and scratches, as well as just an outright change in appearance. I mean, I have muzzles that will never be blued again. They're kind of a bronzish gold now. Things like rainbow colors. You might clean something and then see like a blue or a pink kind of wave inside of it, and you're like, oh, it's just more lubrication that hasn't come off, or it's more oil that hasn't come off. It's a slick, and it might just be the amount of heat that chamber has endured. I had it happen to nickel boron as well, where it just starts getting a darker tint. It starts getting more
loses its shine.
Right.
Yeah, I've noticed that with nickel boron in particular. Even like really shiny, bright nickel boron, it starts getting like a baked on matte finish that's not going to scrub off.
But
or like,
you'll
even
try.
like
You'll try forever.
Or like a parkerized barrel, like a parkerized barrel on an AR-15. It'll turn like white from heat, right? So like the only thing you can really do for that, like because it's carbon steel, if your barrel's getting white, like that white doesn't necessarily mean it's corrosion, but you can get most of that off by using a lubed up patch, swabbing with a wet lubricated patch, but it's never going to be the same again. And it's like anything else. Like you buy that brand new car, you drive it off a lot, it's now a used car the second you drive away, right? And you don't buy a claw hammer to drive nails and then you get upset when there's a dent or a nick on the handle. Like it's a tool, and I look at firearms like tools. They're tools that deserve a special amount of respect, but I'm as cautious with my chainsaw as I am with my AR-15, because the second that I'm not paying attention on observing those safety rules is when either of those two devices mechanically can hurt me. So, it's one of those things where because it's a tool, it's going to get nicks, it's going to get discoloration, it's going to get scratches, and that's just all part of it. So it's like you said earlier, Whitey, it's character. It's character that makes that gun very uniquely yours the more you use it. So don't obsess over it. Obsess over the carbon.
And there's fixes sometimes are only a spot of cool blue or a black Sharpie away.
But sometimes you gotta be careful with that too. There's like the cold blue and the like chemical anodized finish that you can use in aluminum. If you have a scratch and you try to touch it up, sometimes you make it look even worse because now it doesn't recolor the way that it uniformly, and it stands out just as much. So it's a losing battle that I don't. That's why every gun just gets the Krylon touch. If it starts getting rough, it's time to get the Krylon.
All right, rust. Did you drop that in, Whitey?
I just did, as opposed to plastics, because I think we kind of covered.
Yeah, and we'll talk about plastics and under lubing too. So.
The reason why I put rust in there is because not so much, it's in theory, this whole series is based on it's my first gun. There shouldn't be any rust in there. But if stored improperly, if not lubed correctly, things like that, like those styrofoam cases under your mattress in a basement apartment, guess what? You're pulling an orange gun out next time you actually pull that gun out. So prevention is another reason why we clean and lube properly, but some rust is going to be a little bit more different on one side than the other, like a light surface rust versus a hard you're screwed. I found it buried in the back 40 after 60 years of laying rust. Most surface rust, like Nate had discussed earlier, was just like the barrel. It's sometimes easily fixed with just some light scrubbing with a petroleum-based product, and that's going to just loosen that rust right up, take it right off, and bring the finish right back. I had a whole 229, SIG 229, the whole slide just developed like a rash of surface rust because it was stored in a styrofoam like canvas bag inside of a safe that wasn't in a dry area. And all you do is you just lightly with a cotton ball with a rag and some hops or some petroleum-based, like even Mobil 1 or something like that, just wipe it and wipe it and wipe it, and it'll come off.
That's why, like, high gloss, like blued guns rust faster than anything. The oils in your fingers, if you touch blued barrels and receivers, they like the rust sometimes like within like hours of touching them, right? So understand that like different firearms have different finishes. Some are designed more to protect the metal but look attractive than actually be really durable. Like a phosphate or parkerized finish, that's been around since the 1920s. The Parker families who invented that type of metal treatment, right? That's what a lot of military guns are treated with for carbon and steel. And then most aluminum is anodized. And aluminum doesn't really oxidize once it's properly sealed by being anodized, right? But like if it's a light surface rust, you should be able to remove that with just a rag with some lube on it, right? If it's a little bit deeper, then extra fine steel wool, like drowning in lube, is the best way to buff that surface rust off without actually damaging your finish. And if it's actually so bad that it's starting to pit the metal, then you really need to think about how you're treating your firearms, right? So
keeping it on your boat in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah, so rust is as much of an enemy to your firearm as carbon is. For me, like if my barrel's slightly rusty, it's going to take so much time for that rust to actually affect the performance of my gun, but it's going to affect the aesthetics of it right away. For me, because of how I treat firearms, I treat them like tools. I don't mind if there's a little bit of rust in my gun. I get to it as soon as I can. But I don't lose my mind if I see a little bit of rust. It's steel. It's going to rust if it's not treated, if it's not lubricated. So the best way, like what you said, if you're going to store it in a foam case, you're going to get a rusty gun. The best thing to do is keep your gun stored in a dry place, and you have a nice light coat of lube over any part that's metal. That's how you keep from fighting the rust.
Well, and since this is geared more towards newbies, first-timers maybe, you could have inherited a gun, you could have bought a fixer-upper. Another place I see a lot of people run into rust right away is that they'll buy, their first home defense pistol or something, and they'll put it in, they have this document safe. Well, a lot of these, square document safes that are, fire safes, I'll put it in my fireproof safe. A lot of those retain moisture and hold it in. And so, you'll put the gun in there, open it a month later, and it'll be covered in rust. You'll be like, holy crap, how'd that happen? So you kind of really need to be conscious of where you're storing that.
Same thing like if you're outside in the cold weather, right, with your rifle or shotgun, and you go back inside a house, that severe temperature change will cause condensation in the inside of your gun. So even though maybe you didn't shoot your rifle that day deer hunting or your shotgun that day out in the severe cold of winter, that doesn't mean that you don't need to clean your gun. You can get condensation, and if you put the gun away for the rest of the season, you're gonna end up with rust on the inside of your gun from that condensation. So inside and out, it's environmental, like you said, like humidity, stuff like that. You just got to be aware of it. It's easily avoidable by always having a nice light coat of lube on your firearm where there's steel.
Well, let's get into that. How to lube. What do we look for here?
So I'm a huge advocate of the weapon will fire dirty and wet, not dirty and dry. And that's the number one thing I teach people that use an M4 carbine for a living or an AR-15. The bolt carrying group of the AR is the most critical part in this entire weapon, right? So I drown my bolt in lubricant, right? I want to be able to smear it with my finger if it's a liquid lube, and I'm also a big fan of using grease. I use weightlifting grease a lot. I still have a can of 1963 grease rifle that Peter Paulin gave me like 8 years ago, and I'm not even like a third of the way through it. So I use that on my M1 Garand and some older style guns, right? What you want to do is you want to lube your bolt and basically anywhere that there's actual movement on the firearm. Where I don't like to lube is the trigger mechanism. I don't like to lube the trigger and the hammer just because I don't want dirt collecting that lube point. It's really hard to get to the trigger mechanism and the hammer mechanism of certain guns. So I generally only lubricate the primary operating parts. So on a pistol, that'd be the raceways of the slide and where the barrel touches the slide on the inside of the gun. And then on rifles, it's primarily the bolt itself. So that's where I primarily lube. And any excess lube I have, I'll smear on any exposed steel parts. Is pretty much how I do it.
For me, it's going to be pretty similar to what Nate described. Some pistols, especially like revolvers, sometimes you do have to kind of get inside the grip because although you're not supposed to really dump lube all over springs, it's still metal rubbing against metal. And I'll drop, like even on a Glock, I'll drop 1 drop of lube on the, what's the spring that pulls the thing with the doohickey?
Trigger return spring. Yeah,
that one. But not on the firing pin spring, because that's collared. Anywhere there's metal rubbing metal is where I tend to drop lube, and sometimes less is more, especially on those smaller parts, because all it's going to end up doing is if you put too much, it'll gum it up. When you go to the rails on a semi-automatic pistol, for instance, you don't need to put, a tablespoon of lube in each rail. Sometimes 1 or 2 drops, because we're talking tight tolerances. You put a baby in a sink, and the sink is full, water goes everywhere. You have displacement the same way. So a couple drops in each rail and rack away back. There should be like 2 little pearls on the back if you did it right. Of a little bit of lube, and you can rub elsewhere. Any spring, any contact point, any place where it's going to wear, and that will become blatantly obvious if you've put the rounds through it that you should have, even just practicing, because instantly people will look at, I don't have it with me, it's in the other room, the barrel of a Glock, the barrel of an M&P, the barrel of anything that's going to move back and forth. You'll instantly start seeing kind of, not chatter marks, but wear marks from where that barrel is going to come back and cock up to accept the next round and make room for that slide going back, and then come back forward. You'll start seeing little semicircles, and you'll start knowing exactly where that barrel and the slide need to have a little bit of lube attached to them. Inside the rails, you'll start seeing, inside of an AR-15 receiver, you'll start seeing where the, why can't I remember gun name parts?
The cam
you knew
pin.
Exactly what I was talking about. Where the cam pin is rocking around inside that receiver, where the actual lugs are locking in. You'll start seeing those wear areas very quickly. And just make sure those always have something on them. And you should
like the charging handle, because it's an aluminum charging handle on an aluminum receiver in AR-15. You'll see the anodized finish wear off your charging handle and on that raceway on the inside of the receiver very quickly. So even though the charging handle doesn't really get moved that much aside from when you're initially charging the weapon, I still put a little bit of lube on that. But like Whitey's right, like it's going to be weapon specific. Some firearms require more lube than others. AR-15s require the most lubricant of any of them, right? But you can shoot a Glock bone dry. You can shoot an AK-47 bone dry. Do you want to? No, but they're very reliable guns, so generally they perform well even with no lubricant. That doesn't mean that we don't want to lubricate them, but just it's a case-by-case, gun-by-gun basis how much lube you use. I use a lot more lube on an AR than I do on an AK, just like I use a lot more lube on my 1911 than I do on a Glock.
All right, and this is another area where we're going to need more patches, more rags.
All the rags and patches.
So what else? Needle bottles? What's a needle bottle? Explain that.
I'm glad you asked. So Nate Murr has something there. It's commonly, sometimes hobbyists, people who do small machine things, they might know what it is. Oddly enough, the vape community, all those guys that blow big old clouds, they utilize bottles that are made to drop 1 drop or multiple small drops in a very specific point very quickly and easily. Those bottles are available just about anywhere, including like Amazon, for as little as like $1 a bottle, 50 cents a bottle, and you could label them all with a marker, with a label maker.
Or a label maker. You can buy a label maker just so you can mark your lube bottles, like I did. But like, yeah, the way it's cheap. You can get like a 10-pack on Amazon for like $5, and then fill them up with your favorite lube, toss them in your range bag, leave one in your car. You have them, and it allows you to put oil exactly where you want it, which is great for handguns and stuff. So. And
what's great about the multiple bottles is that, I'm a firm believer. I wrote an article way back going, there isn't, lube it up. And it's there's no one lube to rule them all, because if you end up saying this is your first gun and you get what works for this gun, let's say you don't buy, a nickel-plated, a chrome-plated revolver. You don't buy an old 30-30. You don't buy, all these different things that may not like running and or like being stored for long periods of time. and they're going to run on a different lube. So by having these different bottles at your disposal, you could have one full of hops, you could have one full of Fire Clean, one full of Rand CLP, one full of, I don't know, Slip 2000 or something. You're going to have
Synthetic Mobile One. My favorite lube, Synthetic Mobile One. Yeah, like what you said, like because there's differences in the guns. Like I use grease rifle from 1963 on my M1 Garand because that's what that gun likes the most. It was designed for grease, right? And I use Synthetic Mobile One on the raceways of my Glock, and I use white lithium grease on my Scar. So, like there's no like Whitey said it perfect. There's no one lube to rule them all. Lighter weight lubricants will burn off faster under high temp guns, and they'll also seemingly evaporate. If you're going to store a gun for an extended period of time, like putting a nice heavy coat of lube with using a heavier weight petroleum lube on it, that's going to last longer than having a real light coat of like Rem oil or WD-40 or anything like that.
So let's touch on plastics again real quick here. Now, is there ever a case, do you think, to look into conditioning plastics?
Conditioning?
Because there's different kinds of oils to condition, protect plastics.
Well, my thing is most modern polymers like Glocks and like PMags and stuff like that, they respond pretty well to any standard firearms cleaner or lubricant, right? So there's polymers designed to withstand chemicals better than other ones, right? So if it's a concern of yours, I would try it out on a polymer. Like if you're worried about melting your buttstock, try some of it on like an old PMag or something to see if it works. But the only time I ever worry about plastics is if I'm using a really aggressive bore cleaner, i.e. carburetor cleaner. And we talked about that earlier. You just want to get the non-chlorinated stuff for that. But I mean, I don't worry about it. It's not so much of a concern. Before I used to be worried about it. Now, if it's a high-end gun, then by all means, exercise caution is what I would say. But so the same thing like with corrosive ammunition, for example. If you shoot corrosive ammo, like a lot of old Soviet ammo, your gun's going to run it's going to rust faster because the corrosive salt's in that gunpowder and that propellant, right? So how you neutralize that, and this is true for black powder guns too, is you can use anything with ammonia. So I use Windex to clean my AK-74. So my AK-74 shoots 5.45, and I used to have a mountain of old Eastern Bloc ammo for it, which was all corrosive. And if I did not clean that barrel right away, same day, my barrel would start turning orange. The chamber would start turning orange, right? So using Windex, I use the Windex to neutralize the corrosive ammunition, and then I would just clean as normal. But with that ammonia, will Windex hurt my buttstock? That's something to read the warning label.
Read the manual.
Read the manual. Read the warning label, and just use due diligence and caution. Use some common sense.
Yeah. So, all right. So the final step here, we cleaned it, field stripped it, cleaned it, lubed it. Now what?
Especially if it's your life or death gun. Especially if it's your life or death, like CCW or your home defense gun, you definitely want to do an ops check. But the easiest way to do that is just to, with the weapon still unloaded, charge the weapon, pull the bolt to the rear, pull the slide to the rear, make sure it slingshots forward properly if it's semi-automatic. If it's a bolt action or pump, pump it a couple of times, run the action a couple of times. With the safety on, attempt to fire. If you don't get a click, that's good. That means your safety is working. That's important because I've had a shotgun with the weapon engaged in safe. The safety was on, and I had the weapon slam fire as I chambered around. So it was a mechanical failure on the firearm's part. If I would have just closed the action with no round in the chamber, I would have heard it click, and I would have heard the hammer go forward. So, still, we're not using any ammunition. We're just checking the firearm to make sure that all the safety features still work and that the weapon functions how it's supposed to before you reload it and you carry on about your day.
All right, final thoughts on this topic. Whitey?
I think it's super important. I stand by what I said earlier. Read the manual. Do it the slow and easy way. Get familiar with how that gun operates, especially if it's your first gun, because believe it or not, going from a semi-auto pistol to an AR-15, the parts and the functions are pretty darn similar. It's just location of controls difference. So if you learn how a slide catch works, you know how a bolt catch works. If you learn how to operate a slide, you know how to operate a charging handle. If you know how to eject a magazine, you know how to eject a magazine. And it's just a relocation. And when you can make those associations, learning how to clean them, learning where their wear points are, and learning all those things by taking the time, you're going to have a much better experience and be able to pass that information on, which is probably the most important functionality, as well as knowing what went wrong if something does go wrong. There's nothing worse than, kind of not knowing where a mechanical part failed and not even knowing how to get at it. You're no better than the person who drops off their Mercedes and says, it makes this noise. If you know when a wheel bearing is gone, you know where you need to get fixed at a mechanic or what parts to get if you're going to do it yourself. So same thing goes. Learn the system, use the manual, and don't start cutting corners until you know where corners can be cut.
All right, final thoughts, Nate?
I agree with everything what you just said. I mean, like, if I know, like, the Marine Corps is all about the Rifleman's Creed, right? But in the Rifleman's Creed, it says that, like, basically, like, your rifle is your life, right? So you got to give your rifle the same dignity and respect that you give yourself, right? And that's knowing its weaknesses and its strengths, knowing all of its parts and its accessories, how its sights work, how its component parts work, that you're going to guard it and protect it against the ravages of weather and damage and rust and everything else, right? So the thing is, like, you just spend a lot of money on a firearm. Even if it's like a cheaper firearm, it's still money, and that money represents your life and your time. So if you don't take care of your investment, because that's really what it is, then you're not going to get the most out of it. If you don't take care of your concealed carry weapon, then it might fail you at the most critical moment that you need it. If you don't take care of your home defense gun, and, because you just never shoot it, it like lives in your bedroom, then don't be surprised if after 3 years of laying there rusting in a gun cabinet, it doesn't want to work when you need it the most, right? It's all easy stuff. Nobody likes cleaning guns. Anybody that says they likes cleaning guns, I'm immediately suspicious of, because it's dirty, tedious, and mind-numbing work, right? But it's something that has to be done. Just like you have to get the oil changed on your car every couple thousand miles, you need to clean your gun when it starts to get dirty, right? And I'm not gonna lie, like there's that, we started talking earlier, my hunting shotgun literally has never been cleaned, and I've been hunting with that thing for 10 years, right? Like, the best is maybe a boar snake pulled through the barrel once every year, right? But that's a $150 shotgun that I only use to kill ducks and geese with. It's not, the cost of failure is not there for me. But for my Glock, for example, or my 1911 or any other handgun that I carry on a regular basis, I spend a lot more time and effort and attention cleaning those firearms than I do my recreational guns. But I don't want any of them to rust or get damaged, so at the very least, lubricate your firearm. Try to safeguard it from carbon and debris like bore obstructions, and just suck it up and clean your gun when it gets dirty. If you want to be able to stake your life on it, then you got to do your part.
I think I just thought of a great new business idea: a 15-minute oil and lube, not just for your car but your guns too. You bring your car and guns in, and they clean them, oil them, lube them.
I think armors cost more than mechanics. I'm not.
Yeah, I won't let another man change my oil in my truck, so I'm not gonna let him touch my CCW either. But I see where you're going with this. It's not necessarily a terrible idea.
Come on, there's plenty of people too lazy to clean.
There are a lot of lazy people out there. That is true.
Yeah, there's money to be made, maybe. So next week, I think we're going to have a machine gun shoot special, since a lot of us are going to be out at the machine gun shoot in Monroeton, PA, April 30th to May 31st. Hope to see you out there at the Shooter's Gauntlet. We have some revamped Patreon perks here. If you like what you hear, if you want to support the show, you can pledge your support for as little as $1 per episode, which will get you some stickers. There's a $5 level that will get you a Firearms Radio Network shirt or a Gun Guy Radio patch. There's an after show level at $8. We have supply drops and ammo drops with or ammo dumps with swag. Like gear bags, range bags, cleaning kits, stuff like that. There's Patch of the Month Club, T-shirt of the Month Club. Check it out, patreon.com/gun. And I already mentioned the machine gun shoot, and Patriot Patch helps make this episode possible. You can check out the new T-shirts that are up for pre-order. We have a Banana Mag T-shirt up. Check that out. PatriotPatch.co. And Hunter of Design provides the awesome artwork for the Firearms Radio Network. If you need new logo, new branding, new website, anything for your business, check out hunterofdesign.com. Well, this is part of the show where we get to see where we can connect with Whitey. Where can people connect with you, and what's up?
You can generally find me and any of the other guys from Four Guys Guns at Four Guys Guns, all one word. That's on Facebook, that's on Twitter, that's on Instagram, that's on YouTube, just about every social media platform. Occasionally you'll find me snapping away at Snapchat, and that's FGG space Whitey. And yeah, for the most part, I'm a very visual person, so I like dealing with the pictures.
Very cool. Nate, where can people connect with you?
The best way to get a hold of me personally is on Instagram with the tag name GripStop. I also created a Snapchat, so you can always Snapchat me at the same thing. That's your thing, yeah, I know, right? I'm stepping into the 21st century here with all the social medias. You can also find my company, Connect Development Group, on Facebook and Instagram and on the interwebs. So those are the two places to find me.
Very cool. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes or however you listen to the show. Leave us a review there. You can also, please consider joining the NRA or Second Amendment Foundation. And don't forget to check out all the other awesome shows here on the Firearms Radio Network. And also shop our Amazon affiliate link. You can bookmark firearmsradio.tv/Amazon. Well, thank you, Nate.
Good to be on, Jake. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitey.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
That's a wrap. We'll see you next week.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Now, to tell you the truth, I kind of forgot in all this excitement. But being this is the Guns of Hollywood podcast on the most popular pro-gun podcast network in the world and will blow your eardrums clean out, you've got to ask yourself a question. Have you subscribed yet? Well, have you, punk? GunsOfHollywood.com or search Guns of Hollywood on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher app. Punk.